I'm Heather Lee, and this is my audience. Okay, this is my student ID, and this is my outline. Page 1, 2, and page 3. So now I'll begin my video. Photography has always been my passion. As I was growing up, I've always enjoyed shooting photos. I've always had a camera strapped to me, even at a young age. On through high school, I would always take my camera to school, to events, to family reunions, anything we done, I always had a camera with me. But in 2005, I got a job with Bill Miller Photographers, and I began to learn things that I never knew about a camera. They taught me how to set my camera in manual mode instead of automatic, which taught me how to take control of my photos, of my images, of the end result of what I was getting. And I always knew what I was getting once I learned to set my camera that way, instead of taking a picture and then wondering what's it going to look like when I'm done. Anybody can pick up a camera, stick a battery in it, a camera card, look through the viewfinder and mash the shutter button and get a photo. But my hope today is to encourage you to learn to take control of your photos by learning how to shoot your camera in manual mode. So in this speech, you will learn about the exposure triangle, which is the 3 main settings that you need to understand in order to shoot a camera in manual mode. The 3 parts of the exposure triangle are aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So first we're going to start with aperture. Aperture is a hole at the center of the camera shutter, and it's also known as an f-stop. Most people do refer to it as an f-stop, and this is a decimal number. 2.8, 5.6, 7.1, 8.0, these are just a few. The aperture controls how much light reaches your camera's sensor. A smaller f-stop produces more light but a blurrier background, while a larger f-stop produces less light and everything is in focus. So for example, if you have a small child in a sunflower field and you shoot your aperture on 2.8, your child is going to be in focus, but the sunflowers, for as far back as you can see, will be out of focus. Some will begin to even look just like a yellow blob. You won't even be able to see that it was even a sunflower at one time. But if you shoot that same child in that same field on 8.0, you will have your child in focus and all those sunflowers will be in focus. And the same with a large group. I try to remember this when I'm shooting my camera. A large group from 8 to 10 people maybe, I always try to shoot at a higher aperture, maybe 7.1 or up, so that when I shoot the group, every person will be in focus. If I shoot that group at 2.8, the person that I focus on will be in focus, and everybody else in that group will begin to get blurry. So the next step we're going to learn about is shutter speed. Shutter speed is the amount of time that your camera shutter is open, which is allowing light to hit the light sensor. Shutter speed has an effect on the sharpness of your subject, and also it affects the light in your image. A slower shutter speed can cause your image to blur if you are not using a tripod. If you are hand holding a camera, you need to be shooting on a higher shutter speed. Shutter speed is a fraction number, like 1/160th of a second and 1/200th of a second. If I'm hand holding my camera, I'm always shooting on 1/200th of a second in order to reduce the blur, because I don't always have a steady hand. Slower shutter speed lets in more light for a brighter image, but it also allows blur if you don't have a steady hand. A faster shutter speed lets in less light, but you get a sharper image. So I like to say it's better to change your light. Grab your light from the other two settings instead of taking a chance of blurring your photo. The final part of the exposure triangle is the ISO, which stands for International Standards Organization. And ISO is a very important part of photography. It is the camera's sensitivity to light. ISO ranges in numbers from 100, which is the lowest that it'll go, up to 6400 and even higher in some cameras. It is also known as the same thing as it was in film days. Back when we used film cameras and you bought a roll of film, you had to pick a film speed, 100, 200, 400, 800, and ISO in digital is kind of the same thing as the film speed was in film cameras. The higher your ISO, the more light you're getting into your image, so you're getting a brighter image, but it also produces some noise in the background. If you're shooting on 6400 ISO, you're going to have a little grainy look to your photo. The lower your ISO, the darker your image is going to be, but you're going to reduce that grain in your photo. If I'm shooting in a bright sunlight setting, my camera's always on 100 ISO, because that's as low as you can go, and bright sunlight is about as bright as you can get. If I am indoors shooting something low light, then I am shooting from 600 to 1000 or even 1200, and sometimes even higher depending how low light it is. So as you can see, light is very important in photography. Without light, you would have no pictures. You would have no image, because without light is darkness, and you're just going to have a black exposure. George Eastman says to embrace light, admire it, love it, but above all, know it. Know it for all you are worth, and you will know the key to photography. And light truly is the key to photography. And you can see in each of these settings, we need light. Every one of them pertains to light. And people are taking photos every day. Caroline Cakebread says that people in 2017 will take 1.2 trillion digital photos. And the moment you take that photo, that moment is frozen. You mash your shutter button, you can't get that moment back again. Photography is very important. Andy Warhol says the best thing about a picture is that it never changes, even when the people in it change. In years from now, people will be different. Some will be older, some will be even passed away, but those pictures are never changing that you took. So in this speech you have learned about the exposure triangle, which consists of shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. Now you should have an idea how to begin to take control of your camera and your portraits in order to achieve the look that you desire. If you have control of your camera, instead of setting it on automatic and letting the camera have control of your portraits. And it seems confusing and it seems a little difficult at first, but just practice. The more you practice, the more you learn, because practice makes perfect.